Hey there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to talk about being an eclectic reader, which means a reader who enjoys reading across a huge range of genres. And I also want to talk a bit about how this affects what books I pick up. I'll also be doing the eclectic reader tag in this video, which is a tag created by Kelly from Cozy Reader Kelly. I didn't realize she tagged me in her original video, but I was, so I'm doing it for that. But also Cara from Wild Book Garden, who is a fellow eclectic reader, also tagged me. So before we get down to the questions, I want to talk about how being an eclectic reader is sometimes incredibly painful for my TBR, because I'm always interested in any book regardless of genre. Genre really has no impact on whether or not I'll read a book. Mostly, I would describe myself as a thematic reader first and foremost. If it's got a theme that I'm very interested in, I will definitely read it, and I'll mention some of those themes at the end of this video. Those themes almost cross every genre, which means nearly every book is available to me, and that can make it very hard to narrow down whether I will like a book or not upon hearing its synopsis, which means that I will definitely find a lot of 5 stars from my TBR, but I'll also find 1 or 2 stars where maybe I don't gel with the writing and I don't gel with the characters, but the themes are still very good for me. Answering some of the questions, the first question is, where do you usually get your book recommendations? And that definitely has to be from a wide range of places. Booktube, because I'm active on Booktube, Bookstagram, because I'm active on Bookstagram, also book blogs. I'm no longer book blogging, unfortunately, but I still read some of my favorite book blogs and I get recommendations from there. Twitter gives me a lot of recommendations, and I also work in publishing, which means I get recommendations from the book that not only my publishing house is publishing, but when I hear from different publishers, different people working in publishing, I also get recommendations. I come from a family of readers. My mom and all my sisters read, and my grandma does, so sometimes I get recommendations from them. I studied English literature and creative writing, which means I have a lot of friends who read, and even then, friends that I have who didn't study that course are sometimes readers too, so I get recommendations from them as well, which is why my TBR is massive. It's just recommendations being thrown my way every single day, and I love it. I wouldn't change it for the world. The second question is, how do you decide what you read next? That's entirely going on mood these days. Given up on TBRs, have a video about why I quit TBRs, then I made a few more TBRs, and it cemented my decision to quit TBRs once and for all, even for readathons, unless I'm hosting them myself. Such a mood reader. I'll come home from a busy day and I just want to read something happy and easy like a romance or a graphic novel, but then sometimes I just want to learn something and I really just want to learn it straight away, so I'll start reading a memoir or a non-fiction, and then I'll just go through phases of just wanting to pick up fantasy books and then being sick and tired of that, so I just want to pick up horror and be scared. It's entirely mood. I don't understand how I choose what I read next. Then it was about how your reading tastes have changed over time, and I think the key thing that has changed is just me growing up, not necessarily even Booktube. I don't think Booktube has changed how I read that much. Sure, it's given me access to more books, but when I joined Booktube and when I joined Bookstagram, I was reading popular books, but those were bestseller books anyway, like The Hunger Games. They were everywhere. Twilight, it was everywhere, whether I was online or offline. And I will say that sometimes Booktube, specifically when I'm watching smaller channels and not larger ones, have shown me more niche books, and that's where maybe it's influenced me more, where I get to hear about unknown books that I wouldn't have in mainstream media outside of Booktube or in just popular life, I don't know. But other than that, I wouldn't say Booktube has that much of an influence. Some Booktubers in particular do, but I still end up picking up books that I am very interested in. I still end up picking up plays and poetry, and I don't necessarily get those recommendations online. As I've grown up, the way my reading taste has changed is I've just become interested in more and more books, stretching what I read. Booktube did 2 particular Booktubers, How to Train Your Gavin and Cara Wild Garden, convinced me to pick up middle grade again. I gave that up after I was middle grade age. I just decided it wasn't for me and I didn't read them anymore. But with the Artemis Fowl series and some other books, they convinced me that there's still things in there that I can enjoy and take from. I won't pick up every single middle grade, but if it hits any of my themes or it sounds like it's going to be a very fun time, I will pick it up. Still reading young adult, always was. Still reading adult, always was. I read non-fiction when I was younger in the form of Horrible Histories and some other childhood-friendly non-fiction books. Stopped reading that in secondary school and kind of came back to it while I was on BookTube, not necessarily because of BookTube, but because I tried out audiobooks, and that led me to really enjoying memoirs. And then I just kept reading non-fiction, even if it's a memoir or not. So yeah, I just read more than I used to. Oh, and another key changer for me was going to university English literature, because it really, I wrote poetry, but it helped me find an interest in reading more poetry, and ever since then I've just been reading as much poetry as I can get my hands on. University definitely impacted me in that, and taking that Shakespeare course changed the direction of my life, because while I knew I liked Shakespeare before, I absolutely fell in love with his plays. University encourages you to read plays on other courses too, and I found out that's a format that I really enjoy reading. What genres or subgenres do you usually never read? I would never say never particularly, but I don't tend to lean towards true crime, not because it scares me, just because it doesn't interest me as much. For some reason, I haven't been able to put my finger on it yet, but true crime doesn't interest me as much. Not that I never read any true crime. I have read a few true crime books, but it's not one that I would reach for naturally. And then the last thing is, what are 5 particular subgenres you enjoy and recommend books from them? So one of my favorite subgenres, which I recently realized, is fantasy romance. And that is light fantasy romance. It's very specific because it's basically a straight up romance book where it's all about the romance, and it's set in a fantasy world, but it has nothing to do with the fantasy world. There is no plot, there is no war going on, there is no princess drama, there's no plot that revolves around the fact that it's in a fantasy world. It all focuses on the romance. It's just in a fantasy setting. And I prefer if it's not a dark romance. I don't need any evil fairies, I don't need any demons, just a nice, sweet romance. And while this one has fae, it still ticks that box, but Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson is the exact definition of what I mean here. I think the reason why so many people were disappointed by that book is because A, it's not a dark romance and it sounds like it could be, but it really, really isn't. And also they were expecting some more fantasy elements when really it's all about the romance, and it's just kind of nice, it's kind of sweet, and that's it. And that's exactly what I loved about it. The next one that I really enjoy is steampunk western, and I don't even have a book recommendation for this because I have not read enough of them. I can't seem to find the steampunk western balance that I really want. So if you have a recommendation for steampunk western, let me know in the comment section down below. But I really like desert settings where it's all sand. And I also really like steampunk when you can be very creative with the combination of history and the future. And I just really don't think I've read enough of it. There's one book that I'm looking forward to reading, which is called Vengeance Road by Erin, Bownman, which is on my TBR. I know it's Western. I don't know particularly if it's steampunk. I guess I'll find out, but that's one of the reasons why I was attracted to that particular book. The third one I'm very interested in is Afrofuturism. I have a video about Afrofuturism, what it means, with several book recommendations. And what I really love about Afrofuturism is that it's just a genre that defies genres. You can have Afrofuturism science fiction, but you can also have Afrofuturism horror, which is focused on blackness. It's science fiction, but it's also got horror elements. Or you can have Afrofuturism romance, Afrofuturism contemporary, Afrofuturism historical fiction. It's just such a genre-defying genre, and that's particularly what I love about it. That's why I'm writing within it. As someone who is an eclectic reader, it suits my writing quite a lot. What I really recommend is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. It's kind of science fiction, it's got time travel in it, but it's also really focused in history and a historical time period. It does that incredibly well, but I've also got plenty of other Afrofuturism recommendations. If you want any, click that video, link in the description box down below. Another genre that I really love is gothic horror, and gothic itself has become a bit of an ambiguous genre. Not many people know what gothic particularly means or where the horror ends and the horror starts, and I really enjoy this genre. I think it's fantastic. It lends itself to a lot of creativity because it's so genre defiant. Once again, I will not mention the book that I have said and talked about quite a lot on my channel recently called The Haunting of Hill House, which is fantastic. I think one of the reasons why I love gothic horror is because it's creepy and it's scary, and that's something I love, but often it has to do with grief or haunting. And grief is one of my buzzwords words. I love books that deal with grief, and the fact that you're getting something scary but it's got that intense emotion behind it, or a sense of haunting of something that's lingering and can't leave you. Yeah, that hits the bill for me. That fits the bill for me perfectly. And for the last one, the fifth one, I decided I'm not going to recommend a book based on a genre, but I'm going to lean into the fact that I have themes that tick my boxes. And one of the key themes I've already mentioned is grief. Anything to do with grief and sadness really gets me, which means no genre is off limits. I think it's one of my favourite things to read in middle grade because it looks at how children are dealing with grief, which is something that I think is so not understood still, and there's still a lot to understand and unpack with that. One that does that quite well is The Space We're In by Katya Balen. I think memoirs dealing with grief just shows people's true experiences and how heavy that can be, how hard it can be, and how grief is not just focusing on the point where someone has passed away, but on the impact they've had on your entire life. One I would recommend for that is Crying in H Mart by Zauner. Then you can look at grief in terms of young adult, where it's you're growing up and you lose someone and they're supposed to be someone who would help you through these difficult times. You don't know where to go. For that one, I want to read is The Boy in the Black Suit. And then in adult fiction, there is so much to do with grief, because grief is something that adults tend to shove under the rug. They think it should be done with and dealt with quickly and as efficiently as possible so you can move on with the rest of your life, but it doesn't always end up working that way. Another theme that I'm very, very interested in is identity, and identity is something I always put in what I'm writing as well, because it's so ambiguous, it's so open-ended. You can never finish and know your identity completely, not only because your personality and your identity is constantly in flux, constantly changing as you grow up, but also because for some people it can be very, very complicated in terms of gender and sexuality and ethnicity and nationality. It's something that I find very fascinating because I struggle with saying where home is, for example. Is it the Netherlands? Is it the UK? Even though I've never lived in Spain, when I visited there for months on end, I felt very at home there. I lived in Australia for about a year and I felt very at home there. Can I claim that as part of my identity? But those experiences have changed me and made me who I am. So what is identity? Can I claim Jamaica? But I've never lived there, but lots of my heritage is there and lots of who I am, what I eat, and part of my culture is from there. So I think identity and the complexities within it is absolutely fascinating. It's something I'm always thinking about for myself, but also seeing it in other books, learning about other people's identities that I cannot relate to, but will make me better understand the people in the world around me. I love all of that. Anything identity gets me. I want to recommend some novels in verse for this, so I would like to recommend The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I think that does that very well. It also brings in a bit of religious identity. The Black Flamingo by Jean Atta, another one that just fits the bill with that. One that focuses on woman identity, Bloodwater Paint by Joy McCullough, and there are so many more. Anything friendships or found family focused. I think friendships trump romance for me. You give me a good friendship and I will really, really appreciate it. I think friendships are incredibly important in my life and also other people's lives for fighting the feeling of being alone and seeing true friendships that you can't describe in words, but the feeling is still there. The understanding of what it means to be a best friend, but it's almost like family, always gets me. And as someone who has been part of a friend group and as someone who has those friends that feel like family to me, I find it fascinating to see that in books. I recently read Opposite of Always by Justin A. Reynolds and I really liked the friendship group in that, and I think it does a very good job of exploring found family. I also have to recommend The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater, because how could I not? It does found family very well. And lastly, anything Shakespeare related loosely in the slightest way, I will read it and be very interested, whether it's a non-fiction that's talking about Shakespeare theories, whether it's a retelling that's young adult contemporary, whether it's expanding on a play, like writing what would have happened afterwards or writing what would have happened before. I just want to read it. So anything Shakespeare, again, fits that bill. And there you have it. Those are some things that will make me pick up a book, that will make me interested in a book, and me being a messy reader who just wants to read all the books in the world. Let me know in the comment section down below, what is a cross-genre, a sub-genre that you really enjoy? Fantasy romance, steampunk western, historical romance? Let me know down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more. Don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video, and you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!